Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment in our Hen Talks series. My name is Zach Corbin, and I work in the Office of Development and Alumni Relations as an Assistant Director of Virtual and Experiential Engagement. I'd like to thank everyone for registering for today's event. We've got a great presentation lined up this afternoon. Hen Talks is a webinar series that will run throughout the year and feature alumni, faculty, staff, and friends of the university sharing brilliance. Webinars will tackle career and professional development topics, life skills, and more. All Hen Talks will be recorded and can be accessed by visiting the Hen Talks page of UD Connection. A few quick notes. If you have questions that you would like to have answered throughout the presentation, please type them into the questions section. We'll get to as many as time allows, in addition to addressing questions that were submitted beforehand. We encourage you to keep the conversation going on social media by using the hashtag HenTalks. Finally, if there are any technical concerns preventing you from viewing or hearing the webinar, call Citrix's helpline at 877-582-7011. Today's presenter is Dan Freeman, who serves as founding director of the Horn Entrepreneurship at the University of Delaware. Under Dan's leadership, Horn Entrepreneurship aims to empower leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs as they pursue new ideas. Dan has built Horn Entrepreneurship to combine a personalized approach with lessons learned from successful entrepreneurs and evidence-based practices. The resulting programs provide all students with relevant and accessible opportunities to gain valuable knowledge, skills, connections, personal capacities, and experiences through hands-on, project-based learning and real-world engagement. Since its founding in 2012, Dan has helped to raise almost $1 to support Horn entrepreneurship initiatives and grown to positively impact more than 1,000 students each year. The topic of this webinar is developing an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set to advance your career. And I really can't help but think that the timing of this presentation is serendipitous because UD just launched Delaware First, the campaign for the Delaware. And one of the major priorities of the campaign is fostering a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship across campus. And that's a mission that's clearly evident within the Horn Entrepreneurship. And I'm very glad that Dan was able to join us. So welcome, and thank you for presenting today, Dan.
Great. Thank you very much, Zach. It's my pleasure to be here to share some thoughts about how developing an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set can hopefully help you to advance your career. I want to try to make this session as interactive as possible, so please do, as Zach suggested, if you have questions at any time, he's going to signal so that we can pause and address your question. And we're going to jump right in with a quick poll question. So, how much have your job or professional responsibilities changed over the last 12 months? And this is just for me to get a sense of who's in the group. Would you say not at all, somewhat, a lot, or are they completely different? Take just about 15 seconds to see how you respond. All right, so looks like somewhat. Is that right? Is the predominant answer? All right, great. Go ahead with a second poll question. Who or what provides the primary impetus for whether or how your responsibilities change over time? Is it external circumstances, your boss, you, or someone else? We'll just take, again, 15, 20 seconds. So what's the primary impetus? The external environment, your boss, you, or someone else? All right. You, awesome. Great. Let's see here. Good. Well, it sounds like definitely speaking to folks who have seen some change and understand that you at the end of the day are responsible. So perhaps I'm going to be speaking to the choir, so to speak, but let's go ahead and get started. In terms of the agenda, spend a little bit of time talking about the innovation imperative that I think all companies and individuals face, a little bit about entrepreneurial mindset and how to develop your own, same with Skillset, applying the mindset and skill set to your career. And then since some of the pre-questions came in related to actually launching a venture, we can talk about applying the mindset and skill set to launching a venture as well. And so last initial poll question, which of these topics are you most interested in? And I'll try to allocate a little extra time based on the results of this question. So innovation imperative, developing an entrepreneurial mindset, developing an entrepreneurial skill set, utilizing it for career, utilizing it for launching a venture. About 10 more seconds to respond to this one. Great. So it looks like the latter two are the ones. All right, great. Thank you. That's helpful. I don't have the resume presentation here. Zach. The resume presentation thing didn't come back. Oh, there it is. All right. Great. All right. Well, let me just really quickly deal with the innovation imperative. I think most of you probably recognize that all companies and organizations have an innovation imperative. If you're not continuously iterating or disrupting yourself, your competitors certainly are working on that. And as we'll talk about, certainly entrepreneurs are trying to devise ways to utilize new technology to disrupt established industries and business models as well. And all employees need to continuously learn new things and reinvent themselves, or to use the British term, they become one step closer to being made redundant. And so we all definitely have an imperative to continuously learn. And just to back this up, and you may have seen this data, but if we look at the pace of technology change and the rate at which new technologies are adopted, partially because we have ubiquitous communication networks now, smartphones, the years it took to get to 25% adoption in the U.S. population, much less than electricity, the telephone, radio, TV. And if you just think about the incredible way that social media can amplify any piece of information and spread it around the world in very little time, really the value enhancing innovations that come into our lives diffuse very rapidly and can disrupt industries very quickly as well. And the pace is certainly not slowing down by any measure. If you look at the longevity of companies in the Fortune 500, it continues to shrink. If you look at, this is the Gartner hype cycle, just looking at all the disruptive technologies coming down the pike, whether it's blockchain, whether it's autonomous vehicles, machine learning, deep learning, which is incredible, having computers look at images, and I've seen some early data that a computer can actually look at a picture of a tumor and know a skin tumor and know whether it's cancer better than a well-trained doctor can. So some pretty amazing technology coming down the pipeline that certainly promises to continue driving massive amount of change. And according to the World Economic Forum, as many as 50% of the 3 billion jobs that are currently occupied worldwide may be eliminated by 2030 as a result of these technologies. And so clearly some new ones will be created, but the question is how many and what exactly will they look like. And so I guess one question I would have for you is based on the fact that technology is changing so rapidly and there are dire forecasts about the elimination of jobs, which future do you see? Do you see storm clouds gathering in a very limited future with job losses, a lot of stress, and sort of dark times ahead and loss of control? Or do you see unlimited opportunity, job creation, feel very optimistic about the future and know that there are brighter times ahead? And what I would suggest is, depending on your mindset and depending on how you see change and experience change, sort of have a traditional mindset, you're likely to see the storm clouds on the horizon. And if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you understand that change creates opportunity, and really that opportunity exists all around you. And so one of the things I love for Horn Entrepreneurship, and really our purpose, is to try to empower students by helping them to gain knowledge, skills, entrepreneurial capacities, experiences, and connections to empower them to make their own future so that they can adapt and thrive in a sustainable way amidst this rapid change. I've tried to eliminate the word career from my vocabulary and talk more about your professional path than a career, because it's no longer really a linear sequence of steps in a particular domain. It's more of a winding path that might have some disruptions in it and some iterations in it. But at the end of the day, with the right mindset and skill set, you can be empowered to really make the future that you want. And I'm really pleased to see the number of folks who already feel like you're the principal driver of change in your career. One of the things I share often with our team is if your job description hasn't changed year over year, you're probably not really doing a very good job, because the world is changing so fast. The way we engage with it in a professional sense needs to be changing as well. Again, I'm going through the first part pretty quickly to get into the stuff that was suggested to be more of greater interest. So characteristics of an entrepreneurial mindset. What does it mean to have an entrepreneurial mindset? Well, first and foremost, I think the folks who have one sort of chronically question the status quo and think that the world can be a better place. Think that they're within the microcosm of their organization, think their organization can be a better place, that the products could be better. So just constantly questioning the way things are. Perceptive and reflective. So entrepreneurs and folks with an entrepreneurial mindset tend to notice gaps in the marketplace. They notice dissatisfactions that maybe aren't evident to others, and they reflect on their experiences to try to gain insight into what the deeper or richer meaning is. Certainly growth and learning oriented. One of the things that's been really surprising to me is interacting with a large number of people who have absolutely no reason to work another day in their lives. Financially, they have absolutely no point in working. And these are 60, 70-year-olds, and they're some of the busiest people you would ever want to meet, and they're some of the most voracious consumers of new knowledge and new ideas, because they constantly want to improve, constantly want to know new and better ways of doing things. So this growth and learning orientation is really important. Being predisposed to solve problems and seeing any problem really as an opportunity is something else that characterizes entrepreneurial mindset. Many people see the world as a fixed pie. If you have something, it means I can't have it. But folks with an entrepreneurial mindset recognize that the world is full of abundance and that there are really unlimited opportunities. Optimistic and persistent. Entrepreneurship itself is certainly hard, and there's a lot of challenges that need to be overcome. And unless you have the optimism and the drive to persist, you're very unlikely to get very far. It's very easy to get discouraged, especially when you're trying to do new things. Believe in self-determination and self-efficacy. And again, I'm really gratified to see so many folks on the call viewing themselves as principal drivers of your own career and your own job responsibilities. And then desirous of making a positive impact on the world. I think one of the misperceptions about entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship and people with an entrepreneurial mindset is that they're motivated by money. Most are motivated by purpose and a sense of how can they solve a problem, how can they create new value and make the world a little bit better place, whether that's by solving a consumer problem, or we deal with a lot that also are working on social ventures. Another piece of sort of an entrepreneurial mindset is really the way in which entrepreneurs think. And it's a little bit different than what we teach in business school. And let me just explain a little bit about effectual thinking. This is a concept that not too many people are familiar with, so I'll spend just a little bit of time on it. Effectual thinking is a process whereby goals are determined based on available resources and means. And so in terms of available resources and means, we can think of 4 different things. First, who you are. So this is, both your strengths and weaknesses, but also how other people are likely to perceive you. And just yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with a really successful venture capitalist down in Baltimore, who part of the reason for his success was when he was 24, he identified the people he thought were the best investors on the planet. And as a 24-year-old, he was able to reach out to them, not to try to get a job, but just to ask them for their advice, what makes them so successful as investors. And so he understood that as a 24-year-old who wasn't seeking a job, he could get that kind of advice. But if he had approached them, as a 40-year-old, a potential competitor, he probably would not have been able to get that advice. So really understanding who you are and how others perceive you is part of this. Sort of knowing what you know is part of it, and sometimes you're not really sure how what you know can be helpful, but certainly what you know is part of your means. Who you know, the cliche of connections make the world go round is certainly part of it, but it's also what kind of capacities, what are the people that know how to do, who are they? So you can think about having complementary means, knowing people who are dissimilar from you, regardless of sort of the strength of their network. It's also about their means. And then what can you access, utilize, or leverage? So this can be your own personal resources, but it could also be resources of an organization like the University of Delaware by virtue of being a Blue Hen alum, or perhaps some other means. So effectual thinking really is different than causal reasoning, and I'll go into that in just a second. And just to give you an example, the idea here is causal reasoning is really cooking with a recipe versus, an entrepreneurial mindset, and effectual thinking is looking at your refrigerator and what you have in your kitchen and throwing something together based on what you have at hand. And I think that's really a nice metaphor for effectual thinking. Just graphically, the distinction, in what we teach in business school is figure out what your goal is. Strategically, what are you trying to accomplish? What are the different possibilities for accomplishing that goal? And which of those possibilities is optimal? That's pretty much causal reasoning 101. In contrast, entrepreneurial thinking, which is very much how we've built Horn Entrepreneurship from literally nothing to something hopefully making a significant impact in a fairly short period of time. It's really about thinking about what are your means, and then what can you accomplish given those means. And so it's a very different way of thinking. Instead of starting with an end in mind and reasoning back, it's really starting with, well, what do I have that I can work with? And then what can I accomplish that's in the direction that I want to go, given what I have at hand? So a little bit of a different approach. All right, so let's talk a little bit about developing an entrepreneurial mindset and thinking. And again, I want to get to the career stuff as quickly as possible. So certainly, being mindful, paying attention when other people complain, what problems there are in the world, really, again, challenging the status quo, questioning the status quo, considering your means for solving problems, considering how emerging technologies will impact current offerings or business models. Everyone should be paying attention to some of the new disruptive technologies. And as we'll talk about in just a minute, from a career standpoint, becoming your organization's expert on one of these technologies will give you lots of opportunities to really make new positions and create value for your organization. Fall in love with problems. There's sort of a mythology around entrepreneurship, around solutions and ideas, but really the great entrepreneurs fall in love with problems, and they persist until they develop a solution that really does provide compelling value. Share your observations and ideas with others. One great way just to enrich your own thinking is to share what you're thinking about. Share your ideas, get some feedback, and that feedback will help and enrich your thinking even more. my team has noticed that I tend to do this a lot with stuff that I'm thinking about. I'll sort of put out a trial balloon, get a little bit of feedback, and that feedback will help to expand my thinking on the topic. Keeping an opportunity notebook, so just, when you have thoughts or ideas or notice things that are of interest, having a place where you jot it down and you can go back to it and reflect on it, again, to extract richer insights, and really fulfill the imperative to always be learning. So entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial thinking are habits of mind, and just like any other habit, the force of practice, you get better at it with practice, and you get better at it the more you use your entrepreneurial mindset and thinking muscles. So all of these are ways that you can build it, and you'll be amazed as you begin to think in this manner. You become very idea prone. You begin to notice that really there is opportunity all around you, and you end up with the challenge that we have at Horn, which is there's a million things that we can do. How do we actually prioritize and pick? Because there are so many opportunities, we sort of get overwhelmed with all the possibilities. So if you don't feel like you're overwhelmed with all the possibilities yet, then keep practicing and developing those habits of mind. When you do this, you have some mindset shifts. You'll start to see problems as opportunities. You'll start to see change as something that, yes, it induces problems and it induces uncertainty, and those problems and uncertainty are opportunities. And as I've mentioned, you'll start to see that opportunity really is everywhere. And then the last part, just to wrap up mindset, one of the things, just to draw on a quote from Steve Jobs, one of the things that I think is important for everyone to recognize is that, everything around us that we call life was made up by people that were no smarter than us. We can change it, we can influence it, and you can, to use Steve Jobs' word, you can build your own things that other people can use. You can devise your own organizations. You can make your own job. There's just endless opportunity. And once you realize that, really, you'll never be the same. You'll always be wondering, how could we do this better? How could we do this in a different way? So I guess the last poll question that I have for you is, do you believe this? Do you believe in the transformative truth and your capacity to change and influence the things you call life? Yes, no, not really sure. It's okay if it's no. I'm just interested to know sort of your own sense of self-determination and empowerment. Give you just 5 or 10 seconds to choose. That's a big overwhelming on the no side, huh? Or was that on the yes side? That was on the yes side? All right, awesome. All right, great. That is very, very good. All right, well, I'm glad everyone has that great sense of empowerment. Let me talk briefly about entrepreneurial skill set, and then we'll get into career. So entrepreneurial skill set of skills needed to recognize opportunity and execute an evidence-based process. Includes lots of things. Certainly being able to collaborate, build and lead teams. Design thinking is part of an entrepreneurial skill set. The ability to really drill down and understand problems, imagine possible solutions, and iterate on them. Business modeling, the ability to devise and test and conduct experiments, and then use evidence to make decisions. And certainly selling and influencing others is a key part of the entrepreneurial skill set. How do you develop your skill set? Well, the best way is by actually trying to do it, actually trying to use your entrepreneurial skill set. Other ways, immerse yourself in the entrepreneurial community, find mentors, and usually you can find them through immersion in the entrepreneurial community. Read books if you're interested in evidence-based entrepreneurship, which is really the constellation of best practices for bringing new ideas into the marketplace, whether it's internal or external. Start with these authors. Reese, Moria, and blank. Find a local workshop or take a class, and there is one that I would suggest free on Udacity. It's Steve Blank, How to Build a Startup. And again, it just introduces basics of evidence-based entrepreneurship. So let's talk a little bit about how you can use an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set to advance your career, which is really the core topic that people expressed interest in. Well, the first and foremost, I think, is if you look at your mind frame for what is expected of you or what doing a good job means, do you have opportunities to do more than what's asked of you, to really positively violate expectations? Because I think if you're doing your job, quote unquote, you'll probably get to keep it. But if you find opportunities, again, if you have an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set, and you can identify a problem that can be solved, if you can identify opportunities to improve efficiency or workflow, to generate more revenue, to decrease costs, to improve customer retention, aka reducing churn, or just in general make a positive impact on outcomes that are consequential to the organization. And if you're in a nonprofit organization, that might be something that has more of a mission quality to it. Anything that you can do that will have a positive impact on metrics or outcomes that the organization cares about will help you to advance in your career, help you to gain recognition, to be viewed as a value creator, and to deliver value that's superior to the compensation that the organization is providing you with. And then another thing is, again, and I alluded to this earlier, become the organization's expert on a new technology to make a job for yourself. The absolute thought leaders in social media marketing became social media marketing experts before that job title existed. They just were mavens for social media, recognized how it could be used for marketing purposes, and created positions for themselves within an organization. Certainly there's opportunities for that at present around blockchain, probably some opportunities around that for big data, depending on your organization. It really is just becoming known and establishing yourself as an expert in this area by recognizing opportunities for your organization. Any questions or comments on that? I feel like I've been talking a while. I'll pause and see if we're seeing anything.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions that came in here. So you mentioned a couple books, but somebody wanted to know, what are some good books or websites where I could read more about this topic and entrepreneurship in general?
Sure.
So one of the absolute best resources for all things, at least startup related, is steveblank.com. And if you go to the resources section on that website, he has links to 1,000,001 different resources. He's also the one who put together the Udacity course that I mentioned, the How to Build a Startup. And he really is the godfather of overall the evidence-based entrepreneurship movement. And then if you want to read more about sort of the methodology for evidence-based entrepreneurship, Eric Ries and his Lean Startup is one of the sort of vanguard books in this area. And he has a new one actually that's out that I would encourage anyone working within an established organization to take a look at. It's called The Startup Way. And the basic thesis is, if you look at established companies, they have some weaknesses in terms of their ability to innovate. If you look at startups, they have some limitations in terms of their ability to transform into highly efficient execution machines. And ultimately, the successful organizations need both. And he makes some arguments for the incorporation of entrepreneurship as a functional area within established organizations, not sort of sitting off on the side as skunk works, but really matrix throughout the organization and specifically a functional area. And so, I think that idea is still very new. And if you can be the one who drives, the creation of entrepreneurship, innovation and entrepreneurship as a functional area within your organization, that may be a way to advance your career to become the entrepreneurship person within your organization. Any others? Good. All right. Great. So just thought this was a bit of a humorous cartoon. So, one key point, don't just recognize problems. It's important to also generate viable solutions. So keep an eye on that new man. He looks like a troublemaker. So don't just put suggestions in the suggestion box. You have to be willing, if you have a solution, you have to be willing to follow it through and be the one who implements the solution. And the other is, figure out if you're working for an organization that you're a good cultural fit. So this is one of, I think, a particularly funny cartoon. This is a really innovative approach, but I'm afraid we can't consider it. It's never been done before. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I work within the context of a large bureaucratic organization that is very specifically designed and engineered to preserve the status quo. And so this quote is not too dissimilar from some of the things we've heard over the years. And so you just have to sort of recognize that some people get it, some people don't. And what you don't want to do is leave your own future in the hands of people who don't get it. And so if that means creating a different position for yourself, if that means sort of understanding what it would take or why you might want to go work someplace else, those are things definitely to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, if you're thinking about launching your own venture. So just a quick self-assessment I'd encourage you to do before you take the leap. Do you understand that entrepreneurship begins really with identifying a problem and a customer who has that problem? Can you execute a design thinking process? So, one of the challenges around the mythology of ideas in entrepreneurship is, what are the odds that whatever idea you came up with is really the best possible solution to a problem? And many entrepreneurs fall in love with their ideas and don't consider that, I don't necessarily have a full understanding of the problem that the idea is even trying to solve. So it's another one. Do you know best practices for putting your ideas into action and gathering evidence? And again, the books I mentioned previously really do lay out the current body of best practice. Who do you know that can help you? Again, this is about your means. Who do you know? And it might not be just in terms of money. One of the things, what is your skill set? What sort of skill sets do you need to complement yours? What resources can you access internally or externally to pursue the opportunity? And also, what personal resources do you have? And are you capable of launching and scaling an entrepreneurial venture? One of the things that's been really interesting for me, going from having to basically do everything myself versus really getting to the point where I have very little time to do anything myself, and mostly I'm just leading the team. Do you have the personal capacities to go from being a founder to being really the leader of an organization? I'm still trying to figure out if I do, but it's something that I think you need to constantly reflect on. Really, what are you capable of? Really, what do you want to do? Because you may end up in a situation that you hadn't anticipated. And just in general, recognize entrepreneurship's a team sport, and that regardless of how successful you are, either in your career or in your entrepreneurial endeavors, there's always room to continue developing your means and engage lots of other people for help. One of the reasons I think entrepreneurs are so generous, so willing to mentor others, so willing to come out and engage in community activities is because they realize that they were helped considerably by others, and they also see the world as full of abundance and know that other people can be successful too. and they want to help to facilitate that success. Just a couple more slides on entrepreneurship. So if you're thinking about taking the leap, I would say recognize that there's more than one place for you to start your entrepreneurship journey. So the one we always think about is around idea. And generally when we think of an idea, what we have in mind is really a solution. But you could also start with a customer group that you want to create something for, and just immerse yourself with the customers to really understand the problems that they might have. You can start with a new technology and work backward and try to identify a context in which that technology can do something better, faster, cheaper, and provide some substantial value and use. You can start with your means and sort of reason forward. So given what I have, who I am, what I know, who I know, and what resources I can access, what can I accomplish? What sort of venture might I be able to launch that would create unique and compelling value for customers? And really, no matter where you start, all origins lead you back to really understanding the problem, the point of pain, the unmet need, the marketplace dissatisfaction that your idea, your venture is meant to address. So lots of different places to start. You don't have to have, it's okay if you don't have an idea. You can start with these other means or other aspects and come up with an idea ultimately. So lots of different ways to start an entrepreneurship journey. And again, they all ultimately trace back to understanding the problem and who has the problem. And then once you really have some sense of the problem you want to solve and you have a vision for how you want to solve it, best practices are to use an evidence-based process. And the idea here is essentially to take your idea, decompose it into its constituent parts. So who you think the customer is, what problem you're solving for them, what benefits they need to provide unique value, what your channels are going to be for getting the product to customers, what your value capture or revenue model looks like, what the cost structure looks like. And evidence-based entrepreneurship teaches us to put together that business model, and to identify those components, and then design and execute tests for our riskiest assumptions. So, do we really understand the problem? Does this customer group really have that problem? And is it really an unmet need, or are they satisfied with current alternatives? And what evidence-based entrepreneurship teaches us is how to go use evidence systematically to go from our initial vision to something that will actually work. Because as it turns out, the number one risk that results in startup failure, the number one reason startups fail, is they make something that no one wants, that doesn't really provide compelling value. So that's an extremely quick primer on evidence-based entrepreneurship. But again, it's putting your mindset and your skill set to work. And you can think about a startup venture as being internal to your current organization, or as a traditional startup. It could also be a social venture. So last, just in terms of, I know one of the sort of pre-questions was about opportunities for alumni. We have a few, working to build more as resources allow. So one is HenHatch. So that is a venture funding competition. So if you have an idea for a startup, it's formally a concept competition, so 3 to 5 pages. Tell us about the concept and any evidence you have to show that you're on the right track. And there's about close to $40,000 in cash that's available on the alumni track, and then also a wide variety of in-kind services, exposure, and the potential to meet longer-term mentors and investors as well. Another one that we just started is the 17 and 43 Awards. And these are awards to recognize alumni who are leading the most promising and also the fastest growing ventures. So founders, owners, leaders of the most promising and the most successful Blue Hen ventures. We just love to recognize your accomplishments with that program. We just kicked it off this last year. We'll be accepting nominations for the second cycle beginning in January, and then a wide variety of ad hoc events and opportunities. Some of which, if you have an idea and you want to come in and you're geographically proximate, you're welcome to get in touch with us and come into the Venture Center. We employ a professional startup advisor who will sit down and meet with you and at least give you some direction on how to move forward. We do a variety of workshops and other events that you can certainly participate in as well. And then, if you are in a position to share your help or support, part of our model is really built on external engagement and having our students benefit from your experiences and expertise, and serve in a role as a speaker, an expert, a judge, a mentor, etc. So lots of different ways. We're focused on trying to do what we can to help you, and certainly if you're interested in supporting the next generation, we welcome that as well. And with that, I would love to take any questions or address any comments that somebody might have.
All right, we got a couple questions in here, and the first one, so somebody was listening to Reid Hoffman's Master of Scale podcast,
Okay.
and they had a question that they heard on there. They want to get your take. What matters to a startup the most? Having the problem-solving capacity of efficiently running the business, or does it have to be a blend?
Yeah, so problem-solving capacity, what were the ones, Zach? Sorry.
Was problem-solving capacity the process of efficiently running the business, or a blend of both?
Sure. So I think ultimately it's a blend, but the precise mixture of the blend varies. And so initially having problem-solving capacity is going to be the heaviest aspect of the blend, and really identifying the problem, validating the problem, iterating to develop a compelling solution to the problem. But that's really about problem-solving, experimentation, and sort of getting to the point where you have something that starts to look optimal. And then once you have an optimal solution, it really is about efficient processes and sort of transferring to that mode of operation, while at the same time maintaining the problem-solving capacity to avoid sort of getting complacent, as the world continues to move very rapidly, or as you think about your second product. So I think initially the problem-solving is more important, but you have to have the operational process eventually, or you will not succeed.
Got a two-part question here. The first part of the question is, what is the best way to find a mentor in the entrepreneurial space? And the follow-up, how do you branch out into a market in a different geographic area?
Sure. All right, sure. So finding a mentor ultimately is a fairly personal thing, because if they're truly going to be a mentor, there is a little bit more than just a professional relationship that's part of it, at least in my view. And so I think one great way for Blue Hen alumni is to try to leverage the Blue Hen alumni network. I mean, we have an amazing network of folks who have founded successful ventures. You do have to sometimes work the network to get to the point where you can find them. Certainly somebody who has direct experience in your industry is going to be quite helpful. But, it's amazing the strength of that weak tie, that having multiple people that, or having two people that have both gone to the same school, that weak tie turns out to be quite significant in terms of, how people will approach you or respond to you because you're a Blue Hen. So I think that's one way. The other is to really, if you look at a site like meetup.com, depending on where you are geographically, there's all kinds of entrepreneurship-related meetups, tech meetups that you can participate in, where you can meet people, connect with people who are in the space. And it's not going to happen overnight where you'll find a mentor, but by being a persistent presence in that community, you can identify people who are well positioned to be mentors and advisors for you. And as far as the expanding geographically into a new area, it really depends your mode of business and whether there's a strategic partner that you can work with that might have a footprint in that geographic area. If you're going solo, finding someone who would be aligned, who would benefit from your presence in the area would be useful. And failing that, trying to find the local sort of business location resources, whether that's a chamber of commerce or similar organization, to get their sense of what expansion or location in the area, someone who can roll out the welcome mat for you in that community, I think is quite helpful. So someone who can make warm introductions. You just have to find that entrepreneurial support organization in the local community. Can be helpful for geographic expansion.
The next question, if you're at an organization that has a very traditional top-down management style, how do you suggest going about affecting change and getting buy-in from senior leadership?
Great. Yeah, it's a great question. I think part of it depends on where you fall within the hierarchy. And I hate to give too general advice, but I will. I think it's finding a way. First you have to understand what the people directly above you value and sort of what their, and I'm going to use air quotes that you can't see, what profit and loss means to them. So does it mean, are they evaluated solely based on revenue targets? Are there other performance criteria that they care about? And can you sell your ideas for change? Do they promise to positively impact, sort of your boss's P&L? And then if it's a siloed organization where you really just have the direct report to a boss, the boss really doesn't care for the idea, and you're trying to sort of figure out a way around them, to the extent that you can mention it in passing, if you have opportunities to bump into people in lunchrooms, or if you can get a third party who's maybe a peer at the peer level with your boss, or somebody that plays golf with the boss, whatever it is. There are ways that you can use third parties to sort of introduce ideas, especially if you've done some of the background to know that your idea will in fact provide compelling value, and you can demonstrate with evidence that it will. It is a little bit challenging, and frankly, I've had that situation here as well, as far as how do you get the real decision makers, get an idea in front of them that, and sort of not go through the formal chain of command, because that's not a fruitful path. And sometimes you just have to get a little bit creative and think about how do you get through the path indirectly. And in marketing we talk, there's a strategy around pull. So can you get somebody above your boss to actually pull your idea through the organization? That may involve utilizing a third party. But yeah, you just have to be sensitive, because obviously you don't want to infuriate your boss. So.
All right. So there were just few quick questions. We will be following up with an email that includes today's slides and contact information for taking advantage of some of the resources and opportunities to get involved within Horn that Dan mentioned today. That concludes today's edition of Hen Talks. Thank you again to everyone for attending the webinar and for submitting your questions. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Dan Freeman for presenting today. As a reminder, all Hen Talks are recorded and can be accessed by visiting the Hen Talks page of UD Connection. We are always looking for ways to improve our programming, so if you have any suggestions or ideas for future topics, please email me directly at zcorbin@udel.edu. I hope everyone took something away from today's webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all very much.